A day in the life of a medieval servant. In this video, we're taking a gentle journey back to the medieval world, not to witness grand battles or royal ceremonies, but to experience something far more intimate and human. We're stepping into the worn leather shoes of a castle servant in the year 1347, in a manor house in the English countryside. This is not a story of kings and queens, though they pass through our narrative. This is a story of William, a young servant of 20 years, whose hands know the weight of water buckets, whose feet know every cold stone step, whose days begin before light touches the sky and end long after darkness settles over the land. Through his eyes, we'll see the rhythm of medieval life, the small details that filled the hours, the routines that marked the passage of time before clocks ruled our days. We'll feel the texture of rough wool, smell the smoke from kitchen fires, hear the quiet shuffle of feet on rushes scattered across stone floors. Relax, close your eyes, and let yourself drift into this world of 5 centuries past. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share in the comments where you're watching from. Let's begin. You open your eyes in darkness. Not the complete darkness of a moonless night, but that particular quality of blackness that exists just before dawn, when the world holds its breath between night and morning. Around you, in the small servants' quarters, tucked beneath the stone stairs of the manor house, you can hear breathing. Soft breaths, deep breaths, the occasional snore from old Thomas who sleeps nearest the wall. There are 6 of you here, packed into a space no larger than the pantry where you'll work later today. The air is thick with the smell of bodies, of wool blankets that haven't been washed since last summer, of the straw mattress beneath you that crackles softly when you shift your weight. Your name is William. You are 20 years old, though you're not entirely certain of the exact date of your birth. Your mother told you once that you were born in the year of the Great Frost, when the river froze solid enough for carts to cross it. That would make you 20, or perhaps 21. Numbers and dates are not things that concern servants much. What matters is the rhythm of days, the cycle of seasons, the endless repetition of tasks that mark the passage of time more surely than any calendar. You lie still for a moment longer, feeling the warmth of the body next to you. That's Peter, the stable boy, younger than you by perhaps 3 years. He shifts in his sleep, pulling the thin blanket closer, and you feel the cold air rush into the space between you. The coldness helps wake you fully. It's January, the depth of winter, and even here in the relative shelter of the manor house, the cold seeps through stone walls and under doors like water, finding its way through cracks. You know it's time to rise, not because anyone has called you, not because you can see light, but because of something deeper. Your body has learned over years of service to wake at the same time each morning, that moment when night begins to loosen its grip, but before the roosters crow. Rising early is not a choice for a servant. It's as natural as breathing, as necessary as eating. The lord and lady of the manor, Sir Edmund and Lady Catherine, must wake to a house already alive with activity. Fires must be burning, water must be heated, the great hall must be swept and prepared, and bread must be ready for breaking fast. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb Peter. Your joints are stiff from the cold and from lying on the thin mattress. You're young, but already you feel aches that your father, who worked the land until his back gave out, told you would come. Your hands, you notice as you flex them in the darkness, are rough and calloused. There's a cut on your right thumb that you got 3 days ago while cutting firewood. It's healing, but slowly. Wounds always heal slowly in winter. Standing requires careful navigation in the darkness. You know this room intimately, could cross it with your eyes closed, but still you move slowly. Your feet find the cold stone floor and you suppress a shiver. You sleep in your undertunic, a long shirt of rough linen that falls to your knees. During summer, you might sleep in less, but winter demands every layer. You reach into the darkness and find your outer tunic, hanging on a peg that you know is exactly 3 steps from your mattress. The wool is cold to touch, slightly damp from the moisture that seems to permeate everything in winter. You pull it over your head, feeling the familiar scratchiness of the wool against your skin. This tunic is gray-brown, the color of undyed wool, and it falls to just below your knees. It's belted at the waist with a cord you tie in a knot you've tied 10,000 times. Over this goes a sleeveless overtunic, darker brown, which provides another layer against the cold. Your hose, woolen leggings that tie to your brace underneath your tunic, are next. You pull them on, feet first, then tie them carefully. Loose hose mean cold legs, and cold legs mean misery during a long day of work. Your shoes are near the door, where all the servants leave their outdoor footwear. They're simple leather affairs, more like soft boots, worn and shaped to your feet over years of use. There's a hole forming in the left sole that you've been meaning to patch, but there never seems to be time. You make a mental note to ask John, the leather worker, if he has any scraps you might use. John is usually good about such things, understanding that servants help each other when they can. You make your way to the door, stepping carefully over sleeping forms. Old Thomas snores on, undisturbed. Margaret, one of the kitchen maids, breathes quietly near the wall. She's been at the manor longer than you, and sometimes in the evenings, when work is done and there's a moment to talk, she tells stories of how things were before you arrived. She remembers when Sir Edmund's father was lord. A harder man, she says, quicker to anger and slower to praise. The door opens with a soft creak that sounds loud in the quiet of pre-dawn. You slip through and close it gently behind you. The corridor beyond is even colder than the sleeping quarters, and you can see your breath forming small clouds in the darkness. There are no windows here in this lower part of the manor house, no source of light except what filters down from the floors above. But you don't need light. Your feet know these stones, know the slight dip in the floor 3 paces ahead where water pools when it rains, know the place where the ceiling is lower and you must duck your head. You're not the first awake. You never are. That honor belongs to Agnes, the head cook, who rises even before the servants to begin preparations for the day's meals. As you climb the narrow stone stairs that lead from the servants' quarters to the ground floor, you can already smell smoke. Agnes has lit the kitchen fire, probably 15 minutes ago, maybe longer. The smell of wood smoke in the early morning is as familiar to you as your own breathing. It means the day has begun, means work awaits, means life continues in its ancient pattern. The kitchen is at the back of the manor house, a large stone room with a massive fireplace that could fit 2 men standing inside it. Agnes is there, as you knew she would be, moving in the firelight like a shadow given form. She's a large woman, made larger by the layers of clothing she wears, and her face in the firelight looks carved from wood, all lines and angles. She's been at the manor since before you were born, and she runs the kitchen with an authority that even Sir Edmund respects. She glances at you as you enter but says nothing. There's no need for morning greetings at this hour. Words come later, when there's light and time for such things. You move to your first task of every day. Near the back door of the kitchen, there's a line of wooden buckets, 6 of them, each capable of holding perhaps 3 gallons of water. Your job is to fill them from the well in the courtyard and bring them to the kitchen. This water will be used for everything, for cooking, for washing, for drinking, for the endless tasks that require water. 6 buckets, each trip carrying 2, 3 trips in total, though sometimes on busy days you'll make a 4th or 5th trip before the morning is half over. You take 2 buckets, 1 in each hand, and head for the back door. The cold air hits you like a physical force when you step outside. The courtyard is still deep in shadow, though you can see, just barely, the faintest lightning in the sky to the east. Stars still shine overhead, brilliant and cold. The well is in the center of the courtyard, about 30 paces from the kitchen door. Your feet crunch on frost-hardened ground as you walk. The well is deep, dug down through clay and stone to reach the water table far below. There's a wooden cover over it to keep leaves and debris out, which you pull aside. The windlass, a horizontal wooden cylinder with a rope wound around it, squeaks slightly as you turn it. The sound echoes in the pre-dawn quiet. Down below, far below, you hear the wooden bucket at the end of the rope hit water with a soft splash. You let it sink, counting silently in your head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's enough time for it to fill. Then you begin turning the windlass in the other direction, winding up the rope, pulling the heavy bucket up from the depths. It's hard work. The bucket of water weighs perhaps 30 pounds, and you're pulling it up from 50 feet below. Your shoulders strain with the effort. Your hands grip the smooth wood of the windlass handles. The cold makes your fingers stiff, makes your breath come in clouds. But this is familiar work. Work you've done every morning for 6 years, since you first came to the manor as a boy of 14. Your body knows the rhythm, knows how to distribute the effort, knows when to pause for a breath and when to pull. The bucket emerges from the well mouth, dripping and full. You lift it off the hook and pour its contents into one of your carrying buckets. Then you lower the well bucket again, repeat the process, fill your second carrying bucket. The water is cold, so cold that droplets that splash on your hands make you gasp. This is winter water, drawn from deep in the earth, cold as stone, cold as iron. You carry the 2 full buckets back to the kitchen. Each weighs 40 pounds now, and by the time you reach the kitchen door, your arms are already feeling the strain. But this is only the first trip. You have 2 more to make. Agnes takes the buckets from you without a word, pours one into a large iron pot that's already hanging over the fire on a heavy chain. This water will be heated for washing and cooking. The other bucket she leaves standing near her work table. Cold water for drinking, for mixing dough, for all the tasks that don't require heating. You go back to the well. The sky is definitely lighter now, though the sun hasn't yet appeared. The eastern horizon is turning from black to deep blue, and the stars are beginning to fade. You can see more of the courtyard now, the stables along one wall, the storage buildings, the small chapel where Father Benedict says morning prayers. There's no one else out yet. This is your time, these few minutes between night and day, when you have the courtyard to yourself. Second trip. Down goes the well bucket. Splash, wait, pull. Your shoulders protest, but you ignore them. Fill the carrying buckets. Lift, walk. The water sloshes as you move, threatening to spill, but never quite doing so. You've learned the trick of walking with full buckets. Smooth steps, no sudden movements. Let your body absorb the motion rather than fighting it. Back to the kitchen, deliver the water, turn around, go back out. Third trip. The sun is almost up now. You can see the top edge of it, just barely, peeking over the wall of the manor house to the east. The sky is lightening rapidly, turning from blue to pale gray, and the stars have all but vanished. A rooster crows from the chicken coop near the stables, then another, and suddenly the air is full of their calling. This is the sound that marks the official beginning of the day, though for you the day began 20 minutes ago in darkness. As you make your third trip back to the kitchen, you see other servants beginning to appear. There's Robert, who tends the fires in the great hall, and in Sir Edmund's private chambers. He's carrying an armload of firewood, split logs that were cut and dried last summer. There's young Alice, barely 13, who helps in the kitchen and runs errands throughout the day. She looks half asleep still, rubbing her eyes as she heads for the kitchen door. Inside the kitchen, Agnes is now fully engaged in her work. She's making bread, and you can see she's already mixed the dough in a large wooden bowl. Her hands, white with flour, knead the mass with practiced efficiency. Bread making started yesterday, in a sense, because the dough has been rising overnight in a warm corner near the fire. Now Agnes is working the air out of it, shaping it into loaves that will go into the oven later. The oven is built into the wall next to the great fireplace, a dome-shaped cavity made of brick that retains heat beautifully. Later, when the loaves are shaped and risen again, Agnes will rake hot coals from the main fire into the oven to heat it. When the temperature is right, she'll sweep out the coals, slide in the loaves on a long wooden paddle, and seal the opening. The bread will bake in the retained heat, emerging golden and crusty, filling the kitchen with a smell that never fails to make your stomach growl. But that's hours away yet. Now there are other tasks. Agnes looks at you and nods toward the pantry. You know what this means. You're to bring out the items needed for breaking fast. The Lord and Lady will eat in their private chambers this morning, as they do most mornings in winter when the great hall is cold. But they still expect a proper meal, and it's your job to help prepare it. You enter the pantry, a cool room with shelves lining the walls from floor to ceiling. Here are stored the precious supplies that keep the manor fed through the winter: sacks of grain, barrels of salted meat and fish, wheels of cheese wrapped in cloth, jars of preserved fruits, bunches of dried herbs hanging from hooks in the ceiling. Everything is carefully organized, carefully rationed. Agnes keeps careful track of supplies, knows exactly how much of everything remains, and how long it must last until spring, when fresh food becomes available again. You take down a wheel of cheese, hard yellow cheese made last autumn from the milk of the manor's cows. You take dried fish, cod that was purchased from traveling merchants who brought it from the coast. You take a jar of honey, precious and expensive, used sparingly. You take dried apples, wrinkled and sweet. All of these you carry to Agnes's work table. She's finished with the bread dough for now and has covered it with a cloth to rise again. She takes the items you've brought and begins to arrange them. The fish will be soaked in water to remove some of the salt, then cooked in butter. The cheese will be sliced. The apples will be stewed with honey and spices. It seems like a simple meal, but the preparation takes time and skill. While Agnes works on the food, you move to another task. The great hall must be prepared for the day. Although the Lord and Lady won't break their fast there, the hall is still the center of the manor's life, and it must be ready for use at all times. You take a broom made from birch twigs bound to a wooden handle and head toward the hall. The great hall is the largest room in the manor house, a space perhaps 50 feet long and 30 feet wide, with a ceiling that rises high overhead to exposed wooden beams. At one end is a raised platform, the dais, where the Lord's table stands. Below the dais are two long trestle tables where others sit when there are communal meals. The bailiff who manages the estate, visiting merchants or travelers, sometimes the more prosperous tenant farmers. The floor is made of stone flags covered with rushes, dried reeds and grasses scattered across the floor to provide some insulation and to absorb spills and debris. The fire in the great hearth has burned down to coals during the night. Robert has already been here. You can see, because fresh logs are laid on the coals and flames are beginning to lick up around them. But the floor needs attention. You begin sweeping, working methodically from one end of the hall to the other. You sweep the old rushes, now soiled and compressed, into piles. These will be carried out and thrown onto the midden heap behind the kitchen. Tomorrow or the next day, you'll scatter fresh rushes, but for now, clean stone is better than dirty rushes. As you work, the hall gradually fills with light. There are windows high in the walls, narrow openings covered with oiled cloth that lets in light while keeping out most of the wind. The glass windows are only in Sir Edmund's private chambers and in the chapel. Everywhere else makes do with oiled cloth or wooden shutters. The light that comes through is pale and cold, winter light that illuminates without warming. You finish sweeping and carry the piles of old rushes outside to the midden. The sun is fully up now, hanging low in the southern sky, and the courtyard is busy with activity. The stable hands are leading horses out for exercise. Chickens scratch in the dirt near their coop. A cart is being loaded with firewood near the storage building. The manor is fully awake now, and the day has truly begun. Back in the kitchen, preparations for breaking fast are complete. Agnes has arranged everything on wooden platters and in wooden bowls. There's no china here, no delicate pottery. Those luxuries are reserved for the Lord's table only, and even then are used sparingly. For serving, there's wood and pewter and nothing more. Your task now is to carry the meal to the Lord and Lady's chamber. This requires a careful ascent of the main staircase, a broad stone affair that leads from the ground floor to the upper level where the family's private rooms are located. You carry a large tray laden with dishes, moving slowly and carefully. The stairs are worn smooth by centuries of feet, and in some places they're uneven. A misstep here could mean disaster, broken dishes, spilled food, and worse, the Lord's anger. At the top of the stairs, you walk along a corridor until you reach the Lord's chamber. You knock softly on the door, 3 gentle taps that signal your arrival. A voice from within calls for you to enter. You push open the door with your shoulder, careful not to upset the tray. The chamber is warm. There's a fire burning in the fireplace, larger and brighter than the fire in the great hall. The room is furnished with items that speak of wealth and status. A large bed with heavy curtains that can be drawn for warmth and privacy. Chairs with carved backs. A chest bound with iron. Tapestries on the walls depicting hunting scenes. Sir Edmund is already dressed, sitting in one of the chairs near the fire. Lady Catherine is still in her bedgown, wrapped in a fur-lined robe, her hair loose around her shoulders. You set the tray on a small table, bow slightly, and withdraw without speaking unless spoken to. This is the rule for servants. Be present but invisible, helpful but not intrusive, quick but not hasty. You've learned over the years to read Sir Edmund's moods, to know when he wants conversation and when he wants silence. This morning he seems content, neither particularly cheerful nor dour. Lady Catherine smiles at you as you leave, a small gesture that means more than you can say. Some ladies treat servants as if they're furniture, but Lady Catherine has always been kind, always acknowledged your presence. Back down the stairs, back to the kitchen. The morning is moving quickly now, and there's no time to pause. Agnes has a long list of tasks, and you're expected to help with many of them. First, though, you're allowed to break your own fast. This happens in the kitchen, standing up, eating quickly whatever is available. This morning it's bread from yesterday, hard but still edible, with a bit of cheese and a mug of weak ale. The bread you soften by dipping it in the ale, and the cheese provides some substance. It's not much, but it's enough. Servants eat to live, not the other way around. As you eat, Agnes is already beginning preparations for the midday meal. This will be the main meal of the day, served in the early afternoon when the sun is at its highest. It will be more substantial than breaking fast. A pottage made from dried peas and salted pork, bread fresh from the oven, perhaps some of the cheese you brought from the pantry, and ale for drinking. For the Lord's table there will be more, meat cooked in wine, spiced with expensive imported seasonings, sweetmeats for after. Your morning tasks are many and varied. You must help Alice carry water for washing. You must fetch more firewood from the storage building and stack it near the kitchen fire and in the great hall. You must help John, who's come from his workshop, carry a newly repaired bench back to the great hall. You must run an errand to the bailiff's house with a message from Sir Edmund. You must check on the stores of salted meat and report to Agnes how much remains. Each task flows into the next without pause. There's a rhythm to the work, a pattern that you've learned and now follow without thinking. You move through the manor house and its buildings like water flowing downhill, following the path of least resistance, but always moving forward, always accomplishing what needs to be accomplished. The sun climbs higher in the sky, pale and distant behind thin clouds. The morning is passing, as all mornings pass, one moment at a time, one task at a time, the endless repetition of work that defines a servant's life. And yet there's something comforting in this repetition, something solid and real. You know your place in the world. You know what's expected of you, and you know that when night comes and you lie down in your straw mattress in the darkness, you will have done what needed to be done, lived another day in the only life you know. The morning continues to unfold in its careful, measured way. You find yourself back in the great hall, this time not to sweep, but to prepare the space for the day's activities. Sir Edmund has indicated through his steward, a thin man named Geoffrey who manages the day-to-day operations of the manor, that he will be receiving visitors this afternoon. This means the hall must be not just clean but presentable, arranged in a way that speaks of order and prosperity. You start with the tables. The long trestle tables that run the length of the hall are simple affairs, made from thick planks of oak, set on wooden supports. At night, or when not in use, these tables can be disassembled and the boards stacked against the wall to create more space. But today they must remain up and be prepared for use. You take a cloth, dampened slightly with water, and wipe down the surface of each table. The wood is scarred and worn from years of use, marked with knife cuts and stains that no amount of scrubbing will remove. But still you wipe, removing dust and any debris, making the surface as clean as it can be. Next come the benches. These are long seats without backs, capable of holding 6 or 8 people each. They're heavy, made from solid wood, and moving them requires real effort. You pull each bench away from the table, check for any wobbling or loose joints, then position them back in their proper places. Everything must be symmetrical, orderly. The benches on one side of the table must line up with the benches on the other side. The gaps between bench and table must be consistent. These details matter, though you're not entirely sure why. Perhaps it's simply that order creates beauty, and beauty reflects well on the lord of the manor. While you work, Robert comes in carrying more firewood. He's older than you by perhaps 10 years, a solid man with thick arms and a beard that's already showing threads of gray. He's been at the manor even longer than Agnes, and he knows things that you're still learning. He nods to you as he passes, heading for the great fireplace where he begins to build up the fire. The wood he uses is carefully selected, oak and ash, hardwoods that burn hot and long. He arranges the logs in a particular way, with space between them for air to flow. building a structure that will burn steadily throughout the day. You watch him work for a moment, admiring the skill in what might seem like a simple task. But nothing is truly simple when it's done well. Robert knows exactly how to place each log, knows which pieces are dry enough to catch quickly, and which will burn slow and steady. Fire is life in a medieval manor, especially in winter. Without fire, there's no warmth, no cooked food, no light after dark. Tending fire is one of the most important tasks in the household, and Robert takes his responsibilities seriously. As Robert works on the fire, you move to the dais at the far end of the hall. This raised platform, 3 steps above the main floor, is where the Lord's table stands. This table is different from the trestle tables below. It's a permanent fixture, made from better wood with carved legs and a surface that's been planed smooth. Behind it are chairs, not benches. Chairs with backs, with arms, with cushions stuffed with wool and covered in fabric. These are symbols of status as much as they are furniture. You approach the Lord's table with particular care. This is where Sir Edmund sits, where Lady Catherine sits, where any honored guests will sit. Every detail here must be perfect. You take out the cushions from the chairs and beat them outside to remove dust. The cold air of the courtyard makes you shiver, but you work thoroughly, hitting each cushion multiple times to dislodge any particles. When you're satisfied, you bring them back in and replace them carefully on each chair. The table itself receives special attention. You wipe it with a clean cloth, then take a small pot of beeswax polish that Agnes keeps in the kitchen. This polish is expensive, made from beeswax and oil, and it's used sparingly. But the Lord's table deserves the best. You rub a small amount of the polish into the wood, working in small circles, watching the surface begin to gleam softly in the firelight. The smell of beeswax fills your nostrils, a sweet, slightly honey-like scent that always reminds you of the chapel where candles burn during services. As you work, you think about the visitors who will come today. Geoffrey mentioned they are wool merchants from the city, come to negotiate with Sir Edmund about purchasing the manor's wool crop. Wool is the source of much of the manor's wealth. The sheep that graze in the fields surrounding the manor produce wool that's sheared each spring, cleaned, and eventually sold. The money from wool sales pays for the things the manor cannot produce itself: salt, spices, metal goods, fine cloth for the lord and lady's clothing. You wonder what the merchants will be like. You've seen merchants before, of course. They come regularly to the manor, bringing goods and news from the wider world. They dress differently from the people here, in clothes made from finer cloth, dyed in brighter colors. They speak differently too, with accents that mark them as coming from elsewhere. Some of them are friendly, willing to share stories of their travels. Others are cold and businesslike, interested only in their transactions. Your thoughts are interrupted by the arrival of young Alice, who's been sent by Agnes with a message. The bread is ready to come out of the oven, and you're needed to help. You leave the great hall, now looking presentable and proper, and hurry back to the kitchen. The kitchen is filled with the most wonderful smell: fresh bread. Agnes is standing by the oven with her long wooden paddle, and as you watch, she slides it into the oven opening and pulls out a loaf. The bread is perfect, golden brown with a crusty surface that splits slightly on top, where the dough expanded in the heat. She slides the loaf onto a wooden rack to cool, then reaches into the oven for another. There are 6 loaves in total, round and substantial, each one representing hours of work from mixing to rising to baking. Your task is to prepare a space for the bread to cool, and then, once it's cool enough to handle, to store some of it in the pantry while keeping some out for the midday meal. But while the bread cools, Agnes has other work for you. She's preparing the pottage for midday, and you're to help. Pottage is the staple of medieval diet, a thick soup or stew that forms the basis of most meals. Today's pottage will be made from dried peas that were harvested last summer and stored for winter use. The peas have been soaking in water since last night, and now they're soft and ready to cook. Agnes pours them into a large iron pot, adds water from one of the buckets you filled this morning, and then begins to add other ingredients. She sends you to the pantry for salted pork. This comes from a barrel, and you must reach deep into the brine to pull out a chunk of meat. The salt stings a cut on your hand that you'd forgotten about, making you wince. You carry the pork to Agnes, who examines it, nods in approval, and begins to cut it into small pieces. The meat is very salty, preserved in salt since the autumn pig slaughter, and the salt will flavor the entire pot of pottage. Next, she adds herbs, dry thyme and sage that hang in bunches from the kitchen ceiling. She crumbles them between her palms, releasing their fragrance, and sprinkles them into the pot. Then onions brought up from the root cellar, where they've been stored since harvest. You're given the task of peeling and chopping these onions, and soon your eyes are streaming with tears. You've chopped hundreds of onions in your time at the manor, but they always make you cry. There's no avoiding it, no trick that makes it easier. You simply endure, wiping your eyes with your sleeve, continuing to chop until all the onions are reduced to small pieces. Agnes adds these to the pot, then hangs the pot over the fire on the heavy iron chain. The chain is attached to a mechanism that allows the pot to be raised or lowered, controlling how much heat it receives. She adjusts it so the pot hangs at exactly the right height, where it will simmer gently for the next few hours. The pottage must cook slowly, allowing the flavors to meld and the peas to break down into a thick, hearty consistency. While the pottage begins to cook, you're sent on another errand. Lady Catherine needs hot water brought to her chamber for washing. You take a smaller pot, fill it with water from one of the buckets, and heat it over the fire until it's steaming but not boiling. Then you pour it carefully into a large ceramic pitcher, one of the few pieces of pottery in the kitchen that's not made of wood or metal. This pitcher is special, used only for carrying water to the lady's chamber, and you handle it with great care. The journey up the stairs with the hot water requires even more caution than carrying food. Hot water that spills could scald your skin, could damage the wooden stairs, could ruin your clothes. You move slowly, one step at a time, keeping the pitcher steady. By the time you reach the top of the stairs, your arms are aching from holding the pitcher out in front of you, keeping it level. Lady Catherine's chamber is next to Sir Edmund's, connected by a door but separate. You knock and wait for permission to enter. When it comes, you push open the door and step into a room that's smaller than the Lord's chamber, but beautifully furnished. There's a bed with embroidered curtains, a chest painted with flowers, a small table with a silver mirror propped on it. The mirror is one of Lady Catherine's prized possessions, a gift from her father when she married Sir Edmund 15 years ago. Lady Catherine is sitting on a chair near the window, working on embroidery. She looks up as you enter and gestures to a washstand in the corner. This is a simple wooden stand with a large basin on top and a smaller basin below for catching the runoff. You pour the hot water into the basin, and immediately steam rises into the cool air of the chamber. Lady Catherine thanks you, and you bow and begin to withdraw. But she calls you back, asks you to wait a moment. She rises from her chair and goes to her chest, opens it, and pulls out a small bundle of cloth. She hands this to you, explaining that it's an old tunic of Sir Edmund's that he no longer wears. She thought it might be of use to you or one of the other servants. The cloth, she notes, is still good even if the garment is too worn for the Lord to wear. You take the bundle, feeling the weight of the fabric, and thank her profusely. This is a generous gift. The tunic is made from much finer wool than what you usually wear, and even if it's worn, it can be mended. Or perhaps the fabric can be repurposed, cut up and used to patch other garments. Nothing goes to waste in a medieval household. Everything has value. everything can be used. As you leave Lady Catherine's chamber, you feel a warmth that has nothing to do with the pitcher of hot water you carried up. Kindness, even small kindness, means something in a world where life is hard and comfort is scarce. Lady Catherine's gesture is more than just giving away an old garment. It's recognition that you exist, that you matter, that your needs are worthy of consideration. You take the tunic down to the servants' quarters and leave it on your mattress. You'll examine it more closely later when there's time. For now, there's work to be done. The morning is advancing toward midday, and the pace of activity is increasing. Back in the kitchen, Agnes has more tasks. The bread has cooled enough to be handled, and you're to take 3 loaves to the pantry for storage. These will be eaten over the next few days, sliced and served with meals. The other 3 loaves will be used today. 1 for the Lord's table, 2 for the lower tables if there are enough people dining to warrant it. You carry the loaves to the pantry, finding space for them on a shelf where they'll stay dry and relatively fresh. The pantry is cooler than the kitchen, which helps preserve food, but not so cold that bread will freeze. You make a mental note of where you put them, because later you'll need to retrieve them quickly when Agnes calls for them. The morning light streaming through the kitchen's high window has changed quality. It's brighter now, more direct, indicating that the sun has climbed well up into the sky. You estimate it's perhaps 3 hours past dawn, which means the midday meal is still a few hours away, but preparations must continue without pause. Your next task takes you outside again, to the storage building where various supplies are kept. Agnes needs more onions from the root cellar, and you're to bring up a basketful. The root cellar is attached to the storage building, a space dug into the earth where the temperature stays cool and constant throughout the year. In summer, it's blessedly cool. In winter, it's warmer than the outside air. You descend the wooden steps into the cellar, carrying a rushlight to illuminate the darkness. The flame flickers and dances, casting moving shadows on the earthen walls. The smell down here is of earth and vegetables, a musty but not unpleasant odor. Along the walls are piles of root vegetables, turnips, parsnips, carrots, and onions. Each pile is arranged carefully to allow air circulation, which prevents rot. Despite these precautions, there's always some spoilage. You have to check each vegetable before you take it, looking for soft spots or signs of decay. You fill your basket with onions, selecting the firmest ones, setting aside any that feel soft. These rejected onions you place in a separate pile near the steps. They'll be used first, before they deteriorate further. Nothing is thrown away unless it's truly inedible. Even vegetables that are starting to turn can be cut up, the bad parts removed, the good parts used in cooking. Carrying the basket of onions up the steps requires care. The steps are steep and narrow, and the basket is awkward to manage while also holding the rushlight. You take your time, placing each foot carefully. A fall here could mean injury, and an injured servant is of no use to anyone. The manor doesn't have the resources to care for someone who can't work. You've seen what happens to servants who are seriously hurt. They're sent away, back to their families if they have them, or left to fend for themselves if they don't. Back in the bright daylight of the courtyard, you blink and let your eyes adjust. The contrast between the darkness of the root cellar and the brightness outside is always startling. You stand for a moment, feeling the cold air on your face, looking around at the busy scene. The manor is like a small village unto itself, always active, always occupied with the business of survival. Near the stables, you see the horse master working with one of Sir Edmund's riding horses, a fine grey gelding that the Lord favors for hunting. The horse is being groomed, brushed until its coat shines, its mane combed smooth. Horses are valuable animals, worth more than several years of a servant's wages, and they receive care accordingly. The horse master is a skilled craftsman in his own right, knowing everything about horses, their health, their temperament, their needs. You carry the basket of onions back to the kitchen, where Agnes takes them with a nod. She's tasting the potage now, dipping a wooden spoon into the pot and sipping carefully. She frowns slightly, adds a pinch of salt from the salt box, stirs, and tastes again. This process of tasting and adjusting will continue until the potage is exactly right. Agnes has cooked thousands of pots of potage in her life, but she never assumes it's correct without checking. Every batch of peas is slightly different. Every piece of pork has its own level of saltiness. Every pot of water affects the final result. While Agnes works on the potage, you're given another task, preparing the great hall for the midday meal. This means setting out wooden bowls and spoons at each place on the lower tables. The bowls are called trenchers, thick rounds of wood with a shallow depression carved into the center. They serve as both plate and bowl, holding whatever food is served. The spoons are carved from wood or horn, worn smooth from use. You count as you work. There will be perhaps 15 people eating in the hall at midday. Sir Edmund and Lady Catherine on the dais, though they might choose to eat in their chambers instead. Geoffrey the steward. Robert. Agnes and the other kitchen servants. Several stable hands. The horsemaster. Father Benedict from the chapel. A few tenant farmers who have business with the Lord. You set out enough trenchers and spoons for all of them, arranging them in neat rows along the tables. At each place you also put a cup. These are wooden cups, simple and functional, that will be filled with ale. Ale is the universal drink in the manor, consumed by everyone from the lord to the lowest servant. Water is considered unsafe to drink unless it's been boiled, and ale, even weak ale, is safer. The brewing of ale is a constant activity, supervised by Agnes but carried out by several people. There's always a barrel of ale ready for use, and always another barrel brewing for when the current one runs out. The cups arranged, you turn your attention to the Lord's table on the dais. Here the setting must be finer. Instead of wooden trenchers, Sir Edmund and Lady Catherine will eat from pewter plates. Instead of wooden cups, they'll drink from cups made of silver. These precious items are kept in a locked chest in the pantry, and only Agnes and Geoffrey have keys. You fetch Agnes, and she comes with you to the pantry, unlocks the chest, and carefully removes the items needed. The pewter plates are heavy and cool to the touch. They're decorated with simple designs around the rim, patterns of leaves and vines that catch the light. The silver cups are even more impressive, gleaming softly even in the dim light of the pantry. They're not pure silver, Agnes has told you, but silver mixed with other metals to make it harder and more durable. Still, they represent more wealth than you'll ever possess in your lifetime. You carry these items to the great hall with extreme care, your heart beating a little faster with the responsibility. If you dropped one, if you damaged it in any way, the consequences would be severe. But your hands are steady, your steps sure. You've done this hundreds of times. You place the pewter plates on the Lord's table, arrange the silver cups just so, step back and check that everything is symmetrical and proper. The hall is ready now. The fire burns brightly, sending warmth and light into the space. The tables are set, waiting for food and people. The floor is clean. The rushes that remain are spread evenly. Everything speaks of order and preparation, of a household that functions smoothly under careful management. You return to the kitchen, where the pace of activity has increased. The midday meal is perhaps an hour away now, and there's much still to do. Agnes is working on the food for the Lord's table, which will be more elaborate than the pottage served to everyone else. She's preparing a roasted capon, a castrated rooster that's been fattening in a cage for weeks. The bird has already been killed and plucked, and now Agnes is preparing it for roasting. She rubs the bird inside and out with salt and herbs, then places it on a spit, a long metal rod that will be suspended over the fire. The spit must be turned regularly to ensure even cooking, and this task falls to you. It's hot work, standing near the fire, turning the spit, watching the bird as it slowly transforms from raw to cooked. Fat drips from the capon into a pan below, sizzling and smoking. This fat will be saved and used for cooking other dishes because nothing is wasted. As you turn the spit, you feel the heat of the fire on your face and hands. Sweat begins to form on your forehead despite the cold of the day. The kitchen is always hot when cooking is underway, a stark contrast to the cold of the rest of the manor. In summer, this heat is almost unbearable, but in winter, it's not entirely unwelcome. You find yourself thinking about nothing in particular, simply focusing on the task at hand. Turn the spit, watch the bird, keep the cooking even. Time passes in this rhythm. Turn and watch, turn and watch. The capon gradually changes color, turning from pale to golden to a rich brown. The smell is incredible, making your mouth water and your stomach rumble despite the bread and cheese you ate earlier. Roasted meat is a luxury, something servants rarely eat. The capon is for the Lord's table, and you'll be lucky to get a taste of the fat it's cooked in, soaked up with bread. Alice comes and goes, carrying items from the pantry to Agnes's work table. She's learning the kitchen work, being trained by Agnes just as you were trained when you first came to the manor. You remember those early days, how overwhelming it all seemed, how many tasks there were to learn, how many rules to remember. But Alice is quick and willing, and Agnes seems pleased with her progress. Finally, after what seems like a long time but is probably only half an hour, Agnes comes to check the capon. She pokes it with a knife, watching the juice that runs out. When the juice runs clear rather than pink, the bird is done. She nods in satisfaction and has you remove the spit from the fire. The capon is placed on a large wooden platter, and Agnes garnishes it with herbs and places slices of bread around it to soak up the juices. The bread that will be served with the meal is sliced now, thick pieces cut from the loaves that came out of the oven earlier. Agnes has also prepared a sauce for the capon, made from wine and spices, heated and thickened slightly. This will be served in a small bowl alongside the bird. The lord and lady will tear off pieces of the capon and dip them in the sauce, an eating style that seems elegant compared to the simple way you eat. Everything is ready now. The pottage simmers in its pot, thick and fragrant. The bread is sliced. The capon is cooked to perfection. The ale barrels have been brought from the storage area and placed in the great hall where they can be accessed easily. Agnes surveys her domain with a critical eye, looking for anything that might have been forgotten, any detail that might be imperfect. She finds nothing to complain about, which is as close to praise as she ever offers. The church bell rings, the small bell in the manor's chapel that Father Benedict rings to mark the hours of prayer. This particular ringing indicates sext, the midday prayer, which means it's time for the meal to be served. People begin to gather in the great hall, coming from various parts of the manor and from outside. They take their places at the tables, the hierarchy of the manor determining where each person sits. Those of higher status sit closer to the dais, those of lower status further away. You and Alice begin to serve. First, you carry the capon to the dais. Sir Edmund and Lady Catherine have taken their places at the high table. Sir Edmund sits in the center, Lady Catherine to his right. Geoffrey the steward sits to his left. You place the platter with the capon before Sir Edmund, bow slightly and withdraw. It's not your place to carve the bird. Sir Edmund will do that himself, a symbol of his authority and his role as provider for the household. Next comes the pottage. You and Alice carry the heavy pot from the kitchen to the great hall, where Agnes follows with a large ladle. She serves the pottage into the wooden trenchers, a generous portion for each person. The thick soup fills the trenchers, steam rising from it, bits of pork and softened peas visible in the brownish liquid. Agnes's pottage is legendary in the manor, hearty and flavorful, the kind of food that sustains you through hard work and cold weather. Bread is placed on the tables, the thick slices piled on wooden platters where everyone can reach them. The ale barrels are tapped and cups are filled. The hall fills with the sounds of eating and quiet conversation. This is not a formal feast, but an everyday meal, and the atmosphere is relaxed. People eat with their hands and their spoons, tearing bread and dipping it into pottage, drinking deeply from their cups. You and the other servants don't sit to eat yet. First, you must ensure that everyone else has what they need. You circulate through the hall, refilling cups when they're empty, bringing more bread when the platters run low, attending to any requests. Only when you're sure that all is well do you return to the kitchen for your own meal. In the kitchen, Agnes has set aside portions of pottage for the kitchen servants. You sit on a bench near the back door, your trencher of pottage in your hands, and eat quickly. The pottage is delicious, thick and rich, the pork adding a depth of flavor that makes the simple peas into something special. The bread is fresh and crusty, perfect for soaking up the liquid. You eat without speaking, focused on the food, aware that this break won't last long. As you eat, you think about the afternoon ahead. There will be more cleaning to do after the meal. The great hall will need to be cleared, trenches washed, tables wiped down. The Lord's visitors will arrive, and you'll need to serve wine and perhaps light refreshments. There will be more water to fetch, more fires to tend, 100 small tasks that keep the manor running smoothly. The day is perhaps half over, but there's still much work ahead before you can rest. Thank you for joining us on this quiet journey into the past. We hope this glimpse into a medieval servant's life has brought you peace and perhaps helped you drift towards sleep. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what historical topic you'd like us to explore next in our slow, detailed way. Sleep well. Good night.